Hello?
Hello.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Welcome to yet another insightful session entitled Stakeholder Engagement and Leadership. This is module 4 of module 6 of 6 modules that we will be discussing in this course. In the morning, we discussed module 3, which was HR analytics for impact. Module 4 is stakeholder engagement and leadership, where we want to partner with various stakeholders for purposes of attaining mutual benefit. Our course is entitled Certified Human Resource Business Partner, and the stakeholders are some of the partners that we deal with or we engage. Within an organization, we have various partners or stakeholders who have an interest in what we are doing or are affected by what we do. If I may mention them very quickly, one is the top management. These are the boards of directors and the CEOs who have an interest in what we do as HR managers. The second group is the line managers with whom we work on a regular basis to share knowledge resources, to share ideas, and also to work together to achieve corporate objectives. The third group is the employees who have to work to produce goods and services. So in stakeholder engagement, we are talking about bringing together all the individuals or groups who have an interest in what we are doing or are affected by what we are doing, so that in this partnership, we walk the journey together. And once we form this journey as a team, we are likely to create synergy that will enable us to grow as HR managers and achieve organizational success. In this topic, we are going to look at two key things. One is stakeholder mapping, and two, strategic conversations and credibility. As I will demonstrate in the next few minutes, stakeholder mapping has to do with identifying, communicating, and sharing with the various stakeholders our policies, our processes, and our systems. We can also identify the interests of these stakeholders in human resource management. So we have to locate them where they are, identify their interests, and also find a way of satisfying their interests, if not, working together so that we can achieve organizational objectives. For influence tactics, just like in the morning we talked about storytelling, we will be looking at the strategies or techniques that we can use to influence the decisions of the stakeholders. Some of the stakeholders can finance our activities. So we must identify who they are and where they can be found and the level of their influence. So their power to influence can also influence the way we do business in human resource management. So the influence tactics will focus on the methods that we can use to influence the stakeholders to make decisions in our favor. And these decisions could either to buy, or 2, to support, or 3, to work with us. In the second part of this conversation this afternoon, we are going to look at strategic conversations and credibility. By strategic conversations, we mean the discussions that we have with the various stakeholders or partners for purposes of the following. 1, formulating strategies that are aligned with the corporate strategies. Number 2, developing systems and programs so that we can succeed as HR managers. And then number 3, we have conversations around how we can make HR component as a value-adding and strategic partner in our organizations. And then on credibility is how we can present our case to the relevant stakeholders in a way that is convincing, so that they can earn our trust and that they can support us. Stakeholders cannot support us if we do not present ourselves as credible. Just like we discussed in the morning, credibility can come as a result of presenting facts based on data and arguing our case through storytelling. Therefore, we must develop a high degree of trust among our stakeholders so that we build that credibility. Let us start with the first element or a first theme, which is stakeholder mapping and influence, by way of introduction. Stakeholder mapping and influence. So, who are stakeholders? By stakeholder engagement, we mean building and maintaining a relationship with people who have an interest in what we do. And therefore, that means that a stakeholder is any individual or group or organization who has an interest in what HR managers are doing, an interest. What could be the nature of the interest that stakeholders may have? 1, to work. So we may have stakeholders who are interested in working with us. And this could be internal stakeholders or external. Another interest could be to buy. For example, customers are interested in buying our goods or services. And therefore, we should seek ways of partnering with them so that we can satisfy that interest. Others' interests could be investment, that there are people within and outside who may want to invest their resources in our organizations. And therefore, in such a case, we must present ourselves as business partners in which people can invest. And others could be to supply. This is where suppliers come in. So suppliers have an interest in selling their product to us. And that becomes an interest. So in stakeholder engagement, we are looking at how we can partner with the various stakeholders in order to work together. Remember, human resource business partnership or partnering is working with others so that we can achieve set objectives. And here are stakeholders with whom we can engage so that we can achieve organizational goals and objectives. So the key word here is to build and maintain a relationship. This relationship must be of high quality. And the quality relationships may be characterized by the following. One, effective communication, that we communicate on a regular basis if we have a good relationship. Two is reduced conflicts or none of it. That if we are to work with people, then our relationships should be free of conflicts. Because if there are conflicts, then the relationship will be strained. Another characteristic is that the stakeholders are willing to support each other. And that is why we are playing the role of business partners so that we can obtain the support of other stakeholders within or outside our organizations. What is the purpose of stakeholder engagement? Three main things. One, to ensure that they participate in decision making. As HR managers, we make many decisions which are strategic in nature, related to recruitment, training, or performance management. So when we bring in the stakeholders, we are inviting them to participate. This participation could be in the form of giving their ideas or exploring ways in which we can improve the HR department. Then we also need to gain the support of these stakeholders. Support. What kind of support are we looking for? One, it could be in terms of financial support. Two, it could be system support. For example, vendors of systems, they can provide support services by way of maintenance. They maintain our systems. Or if it is consultants, they support us by way of bringing their expertise, either in terms of training or in terms of team building. And then lastly, the purpose of stakeholder engagement is to promote collaboration, where people are working together to achieve common or mutual objectives. This is on the understanding that as human resource managers, we cannot succeed alone. We need the collaboration of others when others collaborate with us, then we are likely to achieve the following. One, reduced chances of resistance. Two, support for our strategies and action plans. And four, when we collaborate, we obtain new ideas and insights on how we can improve the HR function. What does stakeholder engagement cover in terms of scope? This brings to mind all the individuals, groups, or organizations that have an interest in what we do. And these are the employees, the customers, the internal partners, regulators, and the community members. What could be the interest of employees in this process of engagement? One is to ensure that their jobs are guaranteed. That with jobs guaranteed, then they are ensured or they are assured of an income. So their interest is to ensure that their jobs are protected. Customers, they want quality goods and services. They also want to have a new experience. That's why we talk about customer experience. Partners, for example, shareholders, their interest is to get value for their money. That is return on investment. Regulators, these are government institutions or organizations that ensure there is a working relationship in our organizations in various ways. For example, IHRM is a regulator to ensure that the HR function is managed by professionals who are qualified, and therefore it provides oversight. And then community members, this could be individuals or organizations such as churches or religious organizations, or in some cases, civil society, such as pressure groups or human rights groups. These are the stakeholders that we will be discussing as we move forward. Then what is the relevance of stakeholder engagement? One is to strengthen trust. Trust is the way the stakeholders believe in what we are doing and that we will do the right thing. And shortly we will see how we can build that trust of the stakeholders in what we do. Trust building. The other relevance is to ensure transparency. That when stakeholders participate, are consulted, or involved in what we do as HR managers, then we are promoting transparency. That we are open to scrutiny. All the stakeholders can look at what we are doing and we can present the findings of our analytics to them to build that trust. And lastly is alignment, where HR functions or activities are aligned with the expectations of these stakeholders. If not the expectations of the stakeholders, that their contribution should also be aligned with organizational goals. So that alignment is part of the journey that we started yesterday by looking at the concept of human resource business partnering. That when we partner with others, especially the top management of the organization, we want to ensure that our activities or HR initiatives are aligned. Then what's the approach to stakeholder engagement? There are quite a number of them. One is communication, that we pass relevant information to the stakeholders. Why? One, to create awareness, and two, to create understanding. So when we communicate through any of the means that we will mention, we are bringing on board the stakeholders so that they are aware and they understand what we are doing. So one of the approaches to stakeholder engagement is communications, and this communication must be relevant and must be quality. Secondly is consultation, where we create forums or networks to ask the stakeholders to make their contribution. So we ask for their opinions, we ask for their ideas, and we also ask for their perspective on what we do in HR. So to consult is to have a conversation with the stakeholders to obtain insights or ideas about what we are about to implement. And then collaboration, these are forums for people to work together, such as meetings. When we have those managerial meetings, those are collaboration forums where people can engage. And then lastly, what's the impact of stakeholder engagement? One is to enhance decision making. That as HR professionals, we do not have all the answers to the problems or challenges that we face. We need the support of others. We need the involvement of others. We need the participation of others. When all these ideas are brought on board, we refine our decision making so that one, the decisions are of high quality. Two, the decisions are acceptable. And three, the decisions are relevant. Because each stakeholder have their interests, so the relevance of the decisions will be measured in terms of the extent to which their interests are met. Secondly, it reduces risks. A risk is anything within or outside the organization that can cause harm or loss. Loss of what? Loss of employees. Two, loss of money. Or three, loss of company image. We work with stakeholders, therefore, to reduce these risks. What are the risks that arise from the stakeholders? For example, employees. If we do not engage them, then they can withdraw their services, either by way of a strike or by way of an exit. And it is a risk because our work performance is affected. On customers, these are the people for whom we are in business, that without customers, we are not in business. There are customer expectations. If these expectations are not met, then there are risks. So what are the risks related to customers? One, they can stop buying from us. That means there is loss of business. Two, they can reduce their purchases, whether it is goods or services, they can reduce. And this reduction affects our revenues. And that is why we need to work closely with our customers by way of communication, consultation, and collaboration. For regulators, there are risks. But when we work together with the regulators, we get to an understanding of what needs to be done in order to comply with the legal requirements. So when we engage stakeholders on a regular basis, either through communication, consultation, or collaborations, we get to reduce the risks, either legal, compliance, or financial risks, or even operational risks. And then lastly is to improve project success. Like I indicated earlier, HR managers cannot succeed by working alone. We need the support of other people, and these are the stakeholders. I want to argue that the initiatives by HR managers are a form of projects. For example, recruitment can be treated as a project. Two, training can be treated as a project. So what are the characteristics of a project? One, it's a one-time activity. Like recruitment is one time and we finish. Training is one time and we finish. Performance appraisal is one time and we finish. Another characteristic is that it is done within budget. There's a budget for recruitment, there's a budget for training, there's a budget for performance appraisals. There is another characteristic of a project, that it is unique. All the activities in human resource management are unique in their own ways. That there are no two projects that are the same, under the same circumstances, with the same people, with the same circumstances. So every initiative of human resource management is unique, and therefore it is a project. For a project to be successful, we need the input of others, and this input or these others are the stakeholders. So who are the project stakeholders in human resource management? One are the employees, two are the line managers, three are the top management, and four, the board of directors. We need their support so that we can improve the success of our functions. So stakeholder engagement has an impact on decision making, risk reduction, and improved project success. Then what is the concept of stakeholder mapping? I will take us back to what we were saying or discussing in terms of themes, stakeholder mapping and influence tactics. And then secondly, we shall talk about strategic conversations. So in terms of stakeholder mapping, I've started with an introduction where I was talking about who stakeholders are and why we need that stakeholder engagement. And again, if you look at our topic, it talks about stakeholder engagement and leadership. That as HR managers, we need to bring on board all the stakeholders and then provide leadership in this engagement. Which type of leadership are we expected? Probably a transformative leadership. So when we talk about stakeholder mapping, we are talking about identifying individuals, groups, or organizations who have a direct influence on what we do or are affected by what we do. Individuals, groups, or organizations who are affected or we affect them. So if they are affected, then they will always want to ensure that the effect of our initiatives are not negative. It should be a positive effect. If there is a negative effect, then there is a possibility of resistance or withdrawal of support from the stakeholders. So by definition, stakeholder mapping is basically identifying the stakeholders and also establishing how they are affected or how we affect them. Then what is the purpose of stakeholder mapping? We get to clarify or understand the influencers, the supporters, or resistors. Stakeholders influence what we do. For example, customers today, if you visit a supermarket, when you buy products in bulk, there are people who are waiting to escort you either to your car park, or sometimes those of us who have supermarkets in the estates, they can deliver the goods to your doorstep. So customers can influence our decisions. That when they buy our product, we give support services, including product delivery. Or sometimes we train them on how to use the product. So they influence the decisions that we make. As HR managers, our main stakeholders are the employees because they influence our decisions. For example, the decision to promote is based on their qualifications in terms of skills, knowledge, experience, and abilities. So they can influence our decisions. And then secondly, the purpose of stakeholder mapping is to clarify the kind of support that we need. For example, which kind of support do we get from employees? We get support from them by delivering on their jobs. Or two, they give us ideas on what should be done with respect to the various HR initiatives, such as recruitment and selection. We also seek their support when we are doing induction of new employees. So employees are very important stakeholders because without their support, then it becomes difficult for HR managers to succeed. We also get support from other stakeholders, such as customers, that without their willingness to buy from us, then we lose revenue. So their support can be in terms of purchases. We can also get support by way of ideas. Customers know what they want. And therefore, they can give us ideas on how we can satisfy their needs. So the ideas that they give is part of the support that we need from them. They can also support us by referring others to us to buy products. Those referrals can only come if the customer's interests are catered for. Then lastly, the purpose is to identify or clarify stakeholders who are likely to resist. For example, trade unions are likely to resist certain initiatives if they are not engaged. So ladies and gentlemen, that is the purpose of stakeholder mapping, trying to identify their interests and how they can be affected or changed. Thirdly is the relevance of stakeholder mapping. What is the importance? It ensures alignment of HR strategies with the stakeholder interests. The strategies that we formulate in human resource management revolve around recruitment, around training, around performance management, around employee relations, or health and safety. These strategies affect stakeholders. And for that reason, we need to identify the stakeholders who have the power to influence the strategies that we formulate. Otherwise, if we do not engage stakeholders, three things can happen. One, they can sabotage the process. Two, they can resist. Or three, they can withdraw their support. What is the focus of stakeholder mapping? One is decision making. That in stakeholder mapping, we recognize the key decision makers. For example, the top management in terms of decision making are key stakeholders. That the ultimate decisions that are made by the ultimate decisions to be made lie with the top management. So we ensure that their interests are met. Then two, we look at influencers. And again, these are individuals or groups or organizations that can influence or shape or determine the direction of our HR initiatives. And these stakeholders are many, like line managers, they can influence, employees can influence, even top management can influence. The level of influence varies depending on their power. Then lastly, affected employees or stakeholders. Because employees are the people usually at the receiving end, they are mostly affected by what we do as HR. That does not mean that they cannot influence. Yes, they can, and that is why we need to engage them. Engage them through those forums like regular shop floor meetings so that we can get their insights on what we can do as management to improve conditions or relationships. What is the outcome of stakeholder mapping? One is to promote collaboration, communication, and shared ownership. I want to talk briefly about shared ownership because in human resource business partnership, we get insights, we get ideas, and we also get resources from our partners. And these partners are the stakeholders. That when we bring them on board to participate in the HR initiatives, then there is shared ownership. That shared ownership reduces resistance to any proposals that may affect them because they participated in this process, like recruitment. If you bring on board all the stakeholders, then there is shared ownership. People cannot resist what they have participated in. What is the impact of stakeholder mapping? One or two key impacts. One, HR managers are able to deliver on their strategic plans. Like I said, strategic plans revolve around recruitment, training, and the development performance. So when you bring on board all the stakeholders, these strategies can be implemented and can help to achieve long-term objectives. And then secondly, the impact is on competitiveness. That when all members of an organization work together in partnership, then we achieve a competitive advantage. Why? Because there is synergy in people working together. So when we partner with the stakeholders, we strengthen our systems, our processes, our policies. And in that way, we become competitive because everybody brings on board their best in terms of ideas, in terms of skills, in terms of knowledge, in terms of experience. When there is a cross-pollination of all these competences, then an organization is likely to have a competitive advantage. Why am I saying likely? Because it's not automatic that when we have qualified people, we will have a competitive advantage. Why? It depends on the way we use these skills, knowledge, experience, and abilities. How do we utilize this human capital? If this capital is not utilized properly, then we may not have that competitive advantage. That's why I deliberately used may, because it's not a guarantee that when people come together, we achieve a competitive advantage. It depends on how we use these stakeholders to achieve that competitive advantage. And that is where the rubber meets the road. How do we utilize the knowledge and financial resources that we obtain from these stakeholders? Next is categories of stakeholders, though I've already mentioned them, but I can do that in a slightly different way. And a slightly different way means that I've expanded the number of stakeholders and the way of looking at them. One is the internal stakeholders, who are employees, line managers, and HR teams who have a direct influence or directly affected by what we do in HR. So employees are internal. Somebody can ask, why do we say employees and yet managers are also part of the employees? Yes, they are employees, but in real terms, they are employers. Employers are managers, employees are workers. So managers manage employees. And then the HR teams, these are the people within the HR component who implement the HR initiatives or work with others to implement those initiatives. Secondly, is the external stakeholders. Though I've mentioned them, if you look at what I covered here, under the scope, if you look at my introduction, the scope included employees, customers, partners, regulators, and community members. So in this case, the categories under external stakeholders, we are looking at regulators. These are government institutions that provide oversight over what we do as HR managers. And I gave the example of IHRM, who is our regulator, to ensure that HR management is complying with professional standards and that only qualified people can become HR managers. Just like all other professions, like medical profession, engineering profession, nursing profession, all of them have regulators. For doctors, we have the Kenya Medical Dentists and Medical Board. For supply chain people, we have the Kenya Institute of Supplies Management. These are regulators. And their role is to ensure that their members comply with the legal provisions and that their work is conducted in a professional manner. Another external stakeholder is the customer, and I said the customer is interested in buying products. And for us, HR managers, we ensure the products are of high quality. And who is to provide this high quality? It is the employees. Then what should we do with the employees to ensure they provide high quality? One, we hire quality employees. Two, we train employees on quality. Three, we appraise employees on quality. And four, we reward employees on quality. That is the way we can satisfy the customer needs or interests. Suppliers are the people who provide us with the resources that we want. In an open market economy, there are three players. One, the customers. Two, the suppliers. And three, the consumers. Suppliers provide organizations with resources such as raw materials, technology, or even human resources. How do they influence our decisions? One, the quality of what they supply or provide. Two, the timeliness of their deliveries. And three, the cost of their products. And that is why in public sector and even in private sector, when we do open tendering, the suppliers will apply. And when we do a selection, it is based on those three parameters. One, their ability to deliver. Two, the quality of their supplies. Three, the timeliness. And four, the cost. When it comes to picking the most qualified supplier, usually we consider those lowest bidders because we want to get quality, but at a lower price. However, let me put a rider on that the lowest bidders are not necessarily the people who will be selected. we can select high bidders because of the quality of what they offer. The moment we compromise quality because we want to cut on cost, then the end product is low quality. And that brings us to the idea of systems where you put garbage into a system, you will get garbage out. And that is the concept of garbage in, garbage out. If suppliers bring in garbage and we accept them, then we are likely to produce garbage. And that is why we go for highest bidders, because they have quality. Or their products are unique and we cannot find them anywhere else. The other external stakeholder is the community. The community could be individual members who have an influence, such as politicians, or business people, or religious leaders, or in some cases, religious organizations. So we need to partner with these people, one, to obtain their support when it comes to those HR initiatives, and also to avoid the resistance when we implement certain initiatives. Another category, which could be both internal and external, is strategic stakeholders. These are the people who formulate and execute the strategies and policies of an organization. And I've singled out the top management, who are the executive leadership. They shape the policy and the long-term direction of the organization. We are all aware that most policies are formulated at the top and then cascaded to lower levels in the management structure. Because of their influence and power, we need to ensure that their interests are catered for. So the stakeholders at the leadership level expect several things. One, cost effectiveness of HR initiatives. Two, seamless operations. Three, competitive advantage. And when we look at the data, it should point to how HR can contribute to the organizational success, either in terms of revenue generation, profits, or shareholder value. Because ultimately, the chief executives are accountable for the success of the organization, and they cannot take anything less than success. Another category of stakeholder is operational stakeholders. If you look at the internal stakeholders, we have employees. These are the people who will operationalize or implement strategies, policies, programs, processes, and even systems. They implement or ensure implementation. And what is it that they could be interested in? One, clear procedures. And talking of procedures, we must develop SOPs, that is standard operating procedures. For example, in employee discipline, in performance management, in training and development, or in recruitment and selection. So these operational stakeholders require clear procedures. Two, clarity of processes. And three, clear policies that will guide them in decision making. Another category is a supportive stakeholder. And the supportive stakeholders are individuals or groups or even organizations that we work with so that we are able to achieve our objectives in HR. And who are these supportive stakeholders? They include consultants. They support us in many ways in terms of their experience or their recommendations on what should be done, when, and how. Supportive stakeholders could also be community members, because we work in the community and therefore we need to get their support. Support in terms of supplies, because they may supply us with resources, or support in terms of policy so that they can become our change agents or champions. Then lastly, these are resistant stakeholders. And not all stakeholders will always say bravo to what we have done. There are those who are skeptical. They are not very sure of the changes that we are intending to introduce. With this environment in mind, we are able to develop methodologies for engaging them in advance before we introduce the changes. So if we expect changes that are resistant, then we identify the people or stakeholders who are likely to resist. And that in whatever we do, we must have these groups or individuals in mind. And one particular stakeholder who is likely to resist is the trade union. Many of our managers in organizations do not have a good or working relationship with the trade unions, because they are always treated as enemies or adversaries. Even in cases where we think that whatever changes we want to introduce are good, they will always resist. So we bring on board all the resistant stakeholders, particularly the trade unions, so that we can create a partnership. Remember, we are talking about human resource business partner. So we must partner with the trade unions and perhaps develop mechanisms for reducing resistance from them. Before we take a short break, let us look at the steps in stakeholder mapping so that we are systematic in approach to stakeholder mapping. There are these 6 key steps. Step 1 is identification. This means locating or determining who the stakeholders are and their interest. And in an organization, we can always develop a checklist as part of identification, a checklist of all the individuals, groups, or organizations who have an interest in the organization. So this checklist will identify the internal, external, resistant, or operational stakeholders, so that we can tick the boxes and see who else is left out before we settle on those who have a direct or indirect interest in the organization. So after identifying this using this checklist, we determine where they are. Is it internal or external? 3, we also identify their interests. For example, employees, what could they be interested in? Suppliers, what is their interest? Customers, what's their interest? So based on the interest and their location, we are able to determine their levels of influence. So if you are to identify the stakeholders, we should also look at their level of influence or the power to influence. The stakeholders who have the highest interest perhaps could have the highest power to influence decisions. And therefore, we give them first priority, especially when we are talking about the heat map. Heat, H-E-A-T, and then map, where we are juxtaposing the influence and the interest on an organization in relation to the stakeholders. So the influence can be high and the interests are high. So if interests are high and the influence is high, then we prioritize that stakeholder. But if the interest is low and the influence or power to influence is low, then we can put that stakeholder on the watch list. It doesn't mean that they cannot turn out to be influencers. We will always monitor what they are doing. But for those who have the highest interest, we prioritize. Secondly, we analyze. We analyze the stakeholders in terms of influence, impact, and expectations. Impact is the degree to which they are, rather, influence is the degree to which they are able to determine the decisions that we make. Impact are the consequences of them not supporting us or not being involved. What are the consequences? That is the impact or outcomes. If the impact is high, which could be high negative impact, if we ignore them, then we should prioritize them. But if the impact is very low and their influence is also low, then we don't give them priority. And then in terms of expectations, this is what they are likely to get as a benefit from the organization. For employees, what are their expectations? It is to secure their jobs and also ensure that they are paid on time. How about customers? They expect quality products. How about shareholders? They expect a return on their investment. So we must do an analysis, and again, by creating a list of all the stakeholders and assessing their influence, their impact, and their expectations. This is where risks come in, especially on the impact. That if we do not engage them, remember our topic this afternoon is stakeholder engagement. If we don't engage these employees who have the highest influence, the highest impact, and the highest expectations, then we risk losing them. We can lose employees through turnover. Either they join the competition or start their own organizations. And when this happens, then they are likely to give us a run for our money. After analysis, the next step is to plan. To plan on how we can engage these employees. So we do a mapping by way of identification and then look at how we can engage them. And engagement here, like I said, is to ensure that they participate in our decision. So what are the plans or strategies that we can use to engage these partners or stakeholders? There are several. One, we can plan meetings with employees. And I'm sure in our organizations, we have regular staff meetings so that we can either clarify certain issues or pass information to the employees, or in some cases, obtain input from them on the changes that we are intending to introduce. So one strategy or method is meetings. Another one could be collaboration forums, where we can bring people together in a workshop so that they can come and discuss issues. Workshops bring people from different backgrounds to address a particular issue that is affecting them. So stakeholders like suppliers can be brought to a workshop so that we can have a conversation with them to see how we can work together for mutual benefit and understanding. And there are many other strategies which I will mention in a few minutes. Then after developing the plan, you communicate. Communicate the plan to the stakeholders that there is this meeting or there is this forum to discuss this issue, and their input will be appreciated. But most importantly, we need to identify the channels that we are going to use to communicate with the stakeholders. These channels can be written or oral or audio visual. For example, billboards is a way of communicating. We have seen billboards along roads communicating messages. Secondly, we can use electronic media like television or radio to communicate to stakeholders, informing them that there will be a consultative meeting. Or if not, we can use our websites. These websites communicate messages about who we are, our strategies, our plans, and also our products. And lastly, you can communicate through emails. If we have emails of employees, we use them. If we have emails of suppliers, we use them. Emails of executives, we use them. So that is a channel of communication. But we should not use any channel of communication to pass messages. It must be tailored to the needs of the stakeholders. If our stakeholders cannot access internet, then do not use internet, because the message will not get to them. Or if our stakeholders are illiterate or semi-illiterate, the best way to communicate is through direct or one-on-one meetings so that they can ask questions or we can use interpreters. Then after communication, we develop engagement activities such as meetings, workshops, surveys, or collaborative platforms, which we have already planned. In this planning, we talk about meeting, which type of meeting, when is the meeting is done, Who will be in the meeting? What are the expectations? And what are the timelines? That goes into planning. But when we are now implementing the engagement activities, we now conduct the meetings. We conduct the workshops. We conduct the surveys. We initiate collaborative platforms. And then when we have done that, people will contribute their ideas. They will give their suggestions or recommendations. And after that, we monitor how effective the recommendations are being implemented. And therefore, there is need to track the effectiveness of the engagement strategies, like a meeting. How effective was it? Workshop, how effective was it? A survey where we are passing questionnaires, how effective was it? So monitoring is important. Why? Because it gives us feedback on how well we are doing. And two, it also gives us indications of any gaps that may have arisen during this engagement, and so that we can learn from them. And that is learning lessons from our engagement strategies. I now want us to ask questions that we may be having, or seek clarifications, or make comments based on what we have covered in the last 1 hour. We started with the concept of stakeholder engagement, then stakeholder mapping, then categories of stakeholders, then steps in stakeholder mapping. Any questions related to that, or any comment that you may want to make, please go ahead. Lorna, if you are there, please ask your question or make your comment. Christine?
No question from my end.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, no question.
Everything
was perfectly clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, for the compliment, and thanks for your participation. I want us to move to the next slide, and that is influence tactics for stakeholder engagement. If you remember our title, if I can take us back, the title that we were discussing, we are talking about stakeholder mapping and influence tactics. We have done the stakeholder mapping by looking at, one, who the stakeholders are, two, types of stakeholders, and three, the process of stakeholder mapping. So once we have done the mapping, then what next? We need to persuade them to support the HR initiatives. Persuade, that is the influence. So what are the tactics or strategies that we can use to influence the stakeholders? One is rational persuasion. Those of us who are with us in the morning, we talked about HR analytics for impact. And for us to persuade our stakeholders, we need to present to them facts to justify our HR decisions. For instance, in recruitment and selection, you have done your analytics and you have found that recruitment takes a very long time. And it can be demonstrated through the dashboard and the stories that we told. Based on this data, then we make a decision to automate the recruitment process. That decision to automate is based on facts and data. So when we present this to the stakeholders, they can agree with us that the time taken is very long and therefore affecting the operations of the organization. And that is a way of influencing the stakeholders through the use of data. Especially the top management, they want data, they want facts. Once you don't communicate through data, then they are likely to decline their support or even consider it as a waste of time and money. So rational persuasion is where we are presenting facts in a logical way so that we can persuade the stakeholders, all the stakeholders, be it employees, be it line managers, or be it shareholders, or even the senior executives. The second tactic is consultation, where every stakeholder who has an interest is involved in decision making. That before we make any decision, we ask for their opinion or for their ideas. If it's employees and we want to train them, so we ask them to identify their own training needs. And through this, we can tailor-make our training programs so that we bridge that skill or knowledge gap through training. So such kind of consultation makes stakeholders feel valued and important. And in that way, they are likely to support the HR initiative. And again, through consultations, we are able to build ownership of the decisions that we make. Ownership. That if an employee has suggested that they need analytical skills for training, then they cannot turn around and say, no, I don't want that. It came from them and it is satisfying their own needs, and therefore they own that decision. Another tactic is inspirational appeal. Again, you remember in the morning in storytelling, as one of the ways of data analytics, we must present the findings of our analysis to the stakeholders through storytelling. And one of the components of effective storytelling is the emotional connection of the stakeholders with what is being presented. So we want to tell a story of recruitment, a story of training, a story of performance, a story of compensation by inspiring people based on the shared values. For instance, one of our values could be innovation. And as HR managers, we want to promote an innovative culture. So where do we go? We ensure that we hire or recruit innovative employees. Or 2, we train people for innovation. Or 3, we encourage innovation by way of rewarding innovators. So innovation is a value. So when we talk about innovation, it could be appealing to the stakeholders that through innovation, we are able to grow as an organization in terms of revenues, in terms of profits, and in terms of shareholder value. Such kind of connection inspires people so that they can support our initiatives. Remember, as business partners, we want to work with people, and therefore what we present to them must be adding value. So we focus on the shared values. Another tactic is coalition building. Just like alliances in political parties, that you cannot succeed working alone. So you look for like-minded people who can support the initiatives being created or developed by human resource management. So through these alliances, we are talking about people who can support those initiatives. For example, when you are introducing any change, we look for people who support or celebrate change. And these are the change agents. So we build alliances with those change agents. Or in some cases, we make deliberate efforts to bring on board people that we call champions. For example, we want to develop a knowledge management system. So we identify people to support this knowledge management system. And these become our evangelists who can provide the support that we want in developing such a knowledge management system. So when you create coalitions, we are thinking of people who are likely to support. And remember, there are those categories of stakeholders. We call them supporters or supportive stakeholders. And these are our evangelists, or these are our champions in any of the initiatives that we are undertaking. Then another tactic is personalized communication, where we approach individual stakeholders and address their specific needs. For instance, we can address the needs of customers by talking to them individually. What is the need of these customers? So that based on these needs, we can initiate strategies to satisfy those needs. The same can be done with shareholders. What is the interest of shareholders? So that as we develop these HR strategies, we are able to satisfy the needs of shareholders. And perhaps this is the best way to go, because there is no one strategy that fits all the stakeholders. Different stakeholders have different needs, and therefore we can personalize communication so that we can influence them. The last one is negotiation. And usually we negotiate with individual employees when they join organizations, especially during recruitment and selection. We negotiate salaries, for example. How much could they want to be paid? So when we open a discussion on payment, then we are negotiating with the employees. And the expectation is that after the negotiations, you will reach an agreement. Secondly, we can negotiate with our trade unions. Unions have an influence on the behavior and the performance of employees. And there are many things that we negotiate with them. One, payment. 2, working conditions. 3, performance management. 4, health and safety. 5, training and development. And after the negotiations with the trade unions, we develop a CBA, that is a collective bargaining agreement. That agreement is a product of negotiation, and that agreement is binding to all the parties. And this agreement should be registered with the Labor Relations Court as required by the Labor Relations Court Act. So we need to balance the interests of the various stakeholders through negotiation. So we can negotiate with employees individually or through the union. We can also negotiate with suppliers, especially the consultants, on how much we can pay them and what is expected of them in terms of TORs, that is terms of reference. So we negotiate. Negotiation is good because it's a win-win for both parties. That once an agreement has been arrived at, then that settles the case. Next is communication strategies. How do we communicate with our stakeholders? One is tailored messaging, just like most of us have received messages either from Safaricom, from Airtel, or from our banks, advertising certain products. Those messages are not random. They are based on a trend that has been established based on usage. So which products are you using? So for a telecommunication company, they will always monitor how you use your data, how you use your airtime. And they can tailor make messages so that they can attract you to the areas of interest. The same can be done in organizations where we are creating a list of customers and then tailoring messages that are intended to persuade them based on their needs. If it's employees, we know what they need, so we tailor messages to the employees. If it is line managers, we tailor the same. If it is the CEOs, we tailor make the messages so that we create an interest in the messages and also persuade them because we are addressing their needs through these messages. Secondly is regular updates. For continuous improvement, we need to update our systems, our processes, and even our policies. We need to also update our stakeholders on the status of these processes, systems, and policies. These regular updates ensures that the stakeholders are aware of what is going on, where, by whom, how, and when. So once we keep the stakeholders updated, then we create a relationship that we are concerned about their interests, and that is why we update them. Secondly is two-way communication, where we encourage dialogue or questions or clarifications. Dialogue can be encouraged through meetings or through digital means, where the stakeholders can be encouraged to post their ideas or make recommendations on what should be done, instead of having physical meetings, which could be time consuming, we can engage the stakeholders through digital means so that we can obtain feedback or insights from them. And when the stakeholders have posted some insights or some recommendations, we should be able to respond. So there must be a response which is quick enough so that we assure the stakeholders that we are listening. In terms of questions, we can also use electronic or digital means where we look at the FAQs, the frequently asked questions. And in this way, we are able to answer the questions of stakeholders in a proactive way. Or in our dashboards, we can create forums where people can ask questions in real time and they can get answers. So two-way communication is a way of persuading the stakeholders so that we can obtain their support or we can work with them. Another communication strategy is transparent reporting. When we do our HR analytics, we collect data. This data is analyzed, interpreted, and recommendations made. So when we are making a report to the various stakeholders, we should be open to, one, the challenges that we are facing, two, the weaknesses that we have internally, and three, our strengths. When we give a balanced view of what is happening, then our reporting becomes transparent. Stakeholders don't want people to lie to them. And because we are reporting based on data, we say that data does not lie. So if data does not lie, then we should use it as part of our effort to promote transparency. And that, by extension, help us to create a trusting relationship with our stakeholders because we have nothing to hide. Visual communication, as I indicated in the morning, there was the concept of dashboards and storytelling. We said that the use of dashboards helps us to communicate through visuals, such as charts, graphs, histograms, and infographics. Infographics is the use of images. For example, we want to say a whole person, we draw a half a person. So a half represents a certain proportion of our population. And then lastly is the use of multiple channels to communicate. Like I said earlier, in our communication, we can use several methods. Like emails, 2 websites, 3 WhatsApp messages, or 4 reports. So this multi-channel approach helps to cater for the needs of all the stakeholders. Because we have a stakeholder map where we are identifying the stakeholders and their interests together with their power to influence, then our communication channels should be multifaceted, combining meetings, calls on phone, emails, and even social media. Somebody can ask, social media can be subjective. Social media can promote rumors. Yes, they can if you allow that to happen. But if you are proactive in your communication, you don't wait for social media to take over. It becomes very difficult for you to manage. So you must be proactive to communicate in advance when you are using social media. Two, social media experts will tell you that the communication that you make should be accurate. When you communicate accurately, then even social media people will not twist the content to suit their needs because you are ahead of them. And then the choice of social media. Yes, you may choose Facebook, for example, you may choose Twitter, you may choose WhatsApp, you may choose YouTube, but you must set some guidelines on how to use this media, particularly by employees. So that even when we communicate within, there are certain confidential messages that can be communicated through social media. And therefore, we should control the use of WhatsApp messages within groups. So how can we control that? Only administrators can pass information so that we do not have people abusing the use of those social media in our organizations. And also ensure that our employees are trained or educated on a regular basis on the use of social media so that one, we maintain our credibility, and two, we promote our brand image. So ladies and gentlemen, those are communication strategies that we can use to engage our stakeholders. Before we take a small break again, let us look at participation and consultation strategies. Some of them border on the communication strategies, but these are collaborative and forums that can encourage consultation and participation so that we give our stakeholders an opportunity to contribute their ideas or make their recommendations. One of them is focus groups, especially when we are collecting data for data analytics. So focus groups are a small group consisting of experts who have the knowledge that we are looking for. And through their chairperson, they discuss important matters that are related to the organization. So you can form focus groups around recruitment and selection, around training, around performance management, around compensation, because these are experts. So through these experts, we engage them. So the stakeholders can be the experts within or experts from outside, and these are our stakeholders. Secondly, we can have workshops. As I indicated earlier, workshops draw membership from different groups, call them stakeholders, to come together and discuss an issue of common interest. So in HR, we are bringing people together to discuss matters related to human resource management, such as recruitment, training, performance. So such a workshop helps people to share their ideas, to share experiences, and also to propose solutions to any areas that are challenging. So ladies and gentlemen, workshops can be conducted both within and outside the organization so that we can bring the stakeholders on board. So we can have a workshop of suppliers, a workshop of employees, a workshop of line managers. All these are stakeholders. Three is public consultations. Those of us who have read the Constitution, it requires that before a decision is made affecting the public, or an issue of public interest, there must be stakeholder involvement. And in public sector, institutions hold these public consultative meetings so that they can obtain ideas, suggestions, and even recommendations from stakeholders. For example, an organization like Kenya National Highways Authority may want to construct a road through a forest like Masai Mara. They must go to the ground and ask the people for their ideas and opinions. Otherwise, a construction of a road in a forest may cause an imbalance in the ecosystem. And for some communities, they depend on this forest for their revenue or for their existence. So public consultations are important, especially for organizations that are public entities. That does not mean that private enterprises cannot do public consultations. Yes, they can. So that they can obtain their support or can gain their ideas on how best to implement certain initiatives. For HR, we can consult on matters related to recruitment, to training, to performance management, and anything else related to HR. So that we can get the buy-in or reduce resistance. Another way of participation is to develop tools for data collection, such as questionnaires or opinion polls. And mostly we conduct surveys such as satisfaction surveys. Satisfaction with various initiatives such as onboarding, what is the satisfaction level? 2, compensation, what's the satisfaction level? 3, training, what is the satisfaction level? So when we give surveys to the stakeholders, they will give us feedback, which we can use to make decisions. And then there is the advisory committees. And for those of us who are working in HR, employee relations, or disciplinary committees, there's usually an advisory disciplinary committee, whose role is to advise the HR managers and the other senior managers on matters disciplinary. When they are invited to disciplinary meetings, they may not directly participate in this process. Theirs is to listen in and then later advise the HR managers. So these advisory committees could be on discipline, could be on health and safety, could be on performance management, and any other issue related to HR. So advisory committees give us their input in terms of their expert advice. And this advice helps us to develop policies, to develop systems, and improve processes. Lastly, we have open forums. Just like public consultations, open forums are like town hall meetings or forums where employees from different branches, different departments are invited by the management to have a conversation around a number of issues that affect them directly. Through these open forums, employees are encouraged to give their opinions without fear of punishment. And this is one way HR managers can get the real data about what is going on. In some cases, HR supervisors can sugarcoat things. And as a way of directly getting information from the employees, we create such forums so that we can get their contribution. So such forums are important because they bring people together from different sectors or different departments so that they can share their ideas or raise questions which have not been answered for some time. How do we measure stakeholder influence? Engaging stakeholders is not just for fun. We need to find out their level of influence. How powerful are they in terms of influencing decision? So measuring stakeholder influence may take several forms. One, in terms of power analysis. For example, the higher you go in the organizational structure, the more power the stakeholders have. The junior staff may not have power. For example, the power to declare a holiday in an organization cannot rest in a junior staff. It is the top management who have the power to say that we are taking a break for this reason and communicate. And that can affect HR operations. Externally, we have other stakeholders like shareholders. Shareholders have a lot of power to influence decisions. Because organizations are their investments, they expect returns. And for that reason, we need to consider how powerful they are, probably to even close the organization if it is not bringing in the returns they expect. Shortly, we will be looking at the methods of determining shareholder power, and one of them is the heat map, where we are looking at the power of stakeholders against their interests. So the second part is interest assessment. What is the interest of employees, the interest of line managers, the interest of CEOs, the interest of board of directors, interest of customers? The higher the level of interest, the more the influence. Because, for example, shareholders have an interest in ensuring that they get value for their investment. So in terms of revenue, in terms of profits, in terms of bonuses, that is what they are interested in. So if their interests are many, and this interest can determine the direction of the organization, then we consider their interests and prioritize them. Thirdly, we can measure stakeholder influence through support index. We look at the stakeholders who are likely to support or resist the HR initiatives. Like I said earlier, in terms of categorization of stakeholders, we said that there are those supportive employees. There are others who are resistors. So who are these people who are likely to support? So when you get many or most of the stakeholders supporting the initiatives, then we can implement. But again, if the resistance is high and the stakeholders are many, then we withhold that initiative or we forget it altogether. Allow me to go theoretical by using a model developed by Kurt Lewin in terms of change management. Kurt Lewin developed a model called the force field model. The force and field model. This force relates to the power of stakeholders to influence a change. And there are two forces here, the forces that support change, and two, the forces that discourage change, which is resistance. So if the forces for change are strong, then change takes place. And if the forces resisting change are strong, then there is no change. So if HR initiatives are about changes, we look at the stakeholders and their influence. So if they are supporting, then the number of stakeholders should be determined. How many are they that support the initiative for change? And if there are many, then change occurs. But if there are few and the resistors are many, then change does not occur. So the bottom or the long and short of it is that we need to evaluate the willingness of stakeholders to support. When we have majority supporters, then we can initiate a HR change. Another way of measuring is engagement tracking, where we are tracking the level of participation of stakeholders in organizational activities. Level of participation, that is engagement. And through these engagements, we are able to get feedback on how we are doing. And that feedback can be acted upon when we are making decisions in human resource management. For instance, we are conducting a training outside the organization. And there are other employees who might be interested in that training, but cannot attend that training outside. So the suggestion could be that instead of having a one-on-one training, we can have a blended training where we use both online and physical training at the same time. So we develop systems to transmit the training in real time to those people back in the office. So that is a suggestion that we can get through participation, especially when trainings are being conducted or any other initiative is being undertaken like performance management. Then another way of measuring influence is impact. Impact is referred to either the negative or positive consequences or outcomes of stakeholder influence, positive or negative. That if a stakeholder can negatively influence a HR initiative, then we should consider involving them from the earliest opportunity or at the earliest opportunity, so that we bring them on board and obtain their support. Remember, we are talking about the stakeholder engagement this afternoon, and we can only engage them through assessing their impact. And if the impact is huge, we bring them on board as soon as possible. Then lastly is the strength of the relationship between HR and the other business partners who are our stakeholders. So the strength of the relationship can be determined, one, by the frequency of their communication, two, the quality of their relationship, and three, the level of interaction among those stakeholders. This relationship helps to track the trust levels, between HR and the other business partners. Then on that note, I want us to again ask our questions or make our comments so that we can move to the next part. Here we are, influence tactics. What are the tactics that HR managers can use to influence stakeholders? 2, the communication strategies to influence the stakeholders. 3, participation and consultation strategies. And lastly, measuring stakeholder influence. So anybody with a question or a comment to make, please go ahead so that we can move to the next part. Anybody with a question or a comment to make, please go ahead. From my end, I can see Faith. Faith, if you have a question or a comment to make, please go ahead. Okay. How about Christine? Lorna, I can see you. If you have a question, please go ahead. How about Christine? Okay. I will assume
No comment.
that. Thank you, Christine. Lorna? Thank you. Next is the importance of leadership in stakeholder engagement. Remember, if I may take us back to where we started this topic. HR managers play a leadership role in ensuring that things are working and that our strategies are aligned. And this is where we bring in the concept of leadership. Why do we need leadership in stakeholder engagement? One, leaders create a vision. This vision is the future of anything that we are undertaking. So what's the future of HR, for example? And therefore, in this vision, HR managers articulate or communicate the goals of human resource management to the other stakeholders. Why communicate the vision? One, to ensure that we are working together in this journey, focusing on one vision. 2, to ensure that everybody is working towards the same vision. And that 3, we are aligning our initiatives with the vision. So as HR managers, we provide leadership by way of communicating the vision. Secondly is relationship building, where we are talking about strengthening the relationship between HR department and the other stakeholders or partners. And how do we strengthen this relationship? It is through regular communications, regular consultations, and regular involvement. We reduce chances of resistance. And then next is conflict resolution. That as leaders, we should be able to resolve conflicts because conflicts disrupt relationships And here we are talking about creating a good relationship between us and the stakeholders. So conflict resolution is important so that we can build that good relationship. Conflicts arise either as a result of different interests, different opinions, or different objectives. When there's a clash of interests, a clash of objectives, or a clash of ideas, there is a conflict. The HR managers should step in to address these conflicts. So what are the strategies for conflict resolution? One, conflict avoidance. Ensure that the conflict does not occur in the first place by being proactive. Secondly is consultation. Consult the stakeholders on a regular basis so that if there are any emerging or perceived conflicts, they can be addressed. Three, communication. We ensure that we communicate regularly so that there is no conflict. Or lastly, we can collaborate with people so that if there are any conflicts, we discuss them. Another way in which we step in as leaders is motivation. Motivate the stakeholders so that they are able to contribute their ideas or support the HR initiatives. This motivation can be in terms of rewards, and the rewards does not necessarily mean giving money to stakeholders. It could be a recognition, or it could be a commendation that can encourage people to participate. And again, we are talking about participation as a form of engagement. Then a good leader is one who is decisive. They make decisions based on priorities that are related to the stakeholders. So being decisive means that you identify the stakeholder needs and address them by making good decisions. And lastly, influence. That the mere presence of a leader, such as HR, when employees are discussing key or important issues, that gives them an assurance that they are being supported. That personal commitment in terms of time and presence can go a long way in giving reassurance to the employees that the HR management is committed to the success of those initiatives. What is the importance of stakeholder engagement before we go to part 2 of our discussion? One, we build trust, that we can be believed in, or we can be perceived as credible because we engage stakeholders through participation, through consultation, through involvement, and through communication. 2, I mentioned it earlier, risk. In my introduction, I said that when we talk about stakeholder engagement, we are likely to reduce risks. That every stakeholder has an interest. And if these interests are not addressed, then the stakeholders might pose risks. For example, suppliers. If we don't pay them on time or don't pay them at all, next time we need the services of these suppliers, they are not available for us. And probably that is the time when an important customer is waiting for a product. So where do we go? Especially in public sector organizations, where you have to go through the bidding process in open tendering, unless it's a special case where we do closed tendering. It means that we cannot get the supplies from the suppliers, and that can mean that we lose our customer, and that is a risk. But if we engage the customers on a regular basis, we identify their interests, we resolve conflicts, if any, then we are able to reduce or mitigate the risks. Thirdly is collaboration, that through stakeholder engagement, we are able to work together to share our ideas, to share our problems, and also share our experiences. And this becomes a joint problem-solving process where ownership is key. That when we collectively solve problems, then we own the decisions and the results. Another importance is feedback. We get feedback from our stakeholders on what is working, what is not working, the challenges, or even opportunities that exist. So as HR managers, we should always interact with our stakeholders so that they can give us feedback. Employees can give us feedback on the effectiveness of training. Line managers can give us feedback on employee satisfaction. So this feedback is important, and we can only obtain this from our stakeholders. And these stakeholders, as it were, are our partners. Remember, we don't want to lose sight of our discussion that this is certified human resource business partner. So we are partnering with stakeholders, and partners provide information or feedback where need arises. Another importance is resource support, that by getting the buy-in of stakeholders, we can be supported in terms of funding, expertise, or advocacy. Advocacy is what I mentioned earlier, that this is a champion or an evangelist for a certain initiative. An evangelist can be confused with a religious person, but evangelism here means that somebody talking positively about an initiative. Just like the religious evangelists go out there to talk favorably about their God. So we need an advocate to promote our HR initiatives. And then lastly is sustainability, that if we want to sustain HR initiatives, we need to get the support of stakeholders. The second part of our conversation this afternoon is on strategic conversations and credibility. But before I go there, I want to encourage us to ask a question on one, the importance of leadership in stakeholder engagement, or two, the importance of stakeholder engagement in general. Any question or comment that you may want to make, please go ahead. You can raise your hand. I can see from where I am if you have a comment or a question to ask. Okay, I can't see any hand. That suggests that we are okay. And therefore, I suggest that we move to the final part of our presentation this afternoon, and that is strategic conversations and credibility. At the beginning of this session, I said that we have two major topics that we are going to address. One is stakeholder mapping, and two is strategic conversations. And in strategic conversations, we are looking at how we can engage the different stakeholders in terms of strategy formulation, strategy implementation, and strategy review, so that these strategies are aligned with the corporate objectives. And when we have these conversations, we are able to build credibility as HR managers because we are making a contribution to the attainment of the overall strategic goals. So what is a strategic conversation? It is a purposeful or intentional discussion where HR managers create a link between HR initiatives and the broader business strategy. And like we said in our earlier conversations, that in human resource business partnering, we want to work with other stakeholders to achieve business goals. And we can work with others by having these conversations related to HR initiatives like recruitment, training, performance management, compensation. That how can we ensure that these initiatives are contributing to the attainment of the mission, vision, and objectives of the business. So the key word that we are discussing here about strategic conversation is discussion. And these discussions are intentional. And being intentional, therefore, we must plan for these discussions, identify the stakeholders with whom we can discuss, and also look at their influence in these discussions. Then what is the purpose of these strategic conversations? I've talked about it, and please allow me to repeat. It ensures alignment and understanding between HR and senior management who formulate strategies or allocate resources. So that alignment is important to all of us because without that alignment, we achieve what they call a strategic drift, that there is no understanding between HR initiatives and the broader business strategy. What is the focus of this conversation? Is to influence the strategic direction of HR. And how do we do this? In the morning, we talked about HR analytics, where we are using data to make our case in terms of strategy. What is our value in terms of contribution to the overall strategy? So the focus is having a dialogue to influence strategic decisions. What is the approach? The approach to strategic conversation is to shift or move from operational updates to strategic and more outcome-focused conversations. I remember one time the ministers or CSS were signing performance contracts in government. And the president mentioned that it's now high time we moved away from activities and processes to outcomes and outputs. What counts in most organizations is outcome and output, especially to top management. When we talk about recruitment, what's the outcome? Talk about training, what's the outcome? Talk about compensation, what's the outcome? And these outcomes can be explained in the form of data. Strategic managers do not focus on operational aspects like processes or activities. They want outcomes or outputs. In this way, we can measure our contribution to the overall business strategy. And what is the goal of strategic conversation? Is to demonstrate the role of HR in shaping or influencing performance, growth, and organizational agility. By performance, we are looking at one, the quality of our products. 2, our market share, and 3, our revenues. So we need to focus on performance from a HR perspective. And as I mentioned in the morning, one of the tools that we can use in analytics is the dashboard, where we are looking at the dashboard in terms of those 4 perspectives, namely finance, 2, customer, 3, internal processes, and 4, future growth. So in terms of performance, we are looking at the numbers related to revenue, the numbers related to customers, and the numbers related to shareholder value. And then on growth, organizations must grow from their current position to a stronger position. And a strong organization is one that has necessary and adequate systems, processes, procedures, and policies that enable HR managers to operate effectively. So through these strategic conversations, we are able to identify priorities in terms of recruitment, training, and performance so that we can enable our organizations to grow, either to grow the revenues, grow the profits, grow their market share, or even grow their branch network. Then lastly, organizational agility, where we make sure that our organization adapts to changes in the environment. So by having a strategic conversation related to policy, then we are making our organizations agile. And this can be done by looking at what works and what does not work, what are the changes in our environment, what are the best practices through benchmarking, and we adopt those best practices as quickly as possible. Agility. Then lastly is outcome. What is the outcome of strategic conversation? Is the strengthened collaboration and trust. As I said, collaboration is working with others. And in human resource business partnering, we need to collaborate with others. The strength of this collaboration can be ensured through strategic conversations. Next is elements of effective strategic conversation. What can tell us that our strategic conversations are likely to be successful? One is preparation, like I said, that having a strategic conversation requires that we be systematic in our approach. And this systematic approach looks at how we can convert our operational activities to a more outcome-focused business initiative. And that requires planning. So preparation is part of planning, where we are gathering data on the strategic initiatives that are likely to support the corporate objectives. Gathering data related to recruitment, performance, compensation, health and safety, and employee relations. 2, in this conversation, we must have clarity of ideas, clarity of direction, and the clarity of vision. And this can only be done if we use a language that is simple, concise, or to the point, and business-oriented. As business partners, we talk about customers, we talk about business growth, we talk about competition, we talk about change, and we also talk about partnerships. And this is the language that we should be discussing when we have these strategic conversations, that how can we as HR managers contribute to growth, to profits, to customer satisfaction, to competitiveness. That's a business-oriented language. And earlier on, I mentioned business acumen. Acumen refers to the understanding or knowledge of business. Relevance of strategic conversations, that we should align these conversations with the current organizational priorities and or challenges. That an organization could be facing a financial crisis. And therefore, in our conversation, we should look at how we can help our organizations to manage that financial crisis. So from our end as human resource managers, we are looking at strategies for cost cutting. So we have a conversation around cost cutting. Or a conversation about revenue generation, so that we bridge the financial deficit or gap. Another element is empathy, where we consider or bring into perspective the needs and requirements of our stakeholders, and particularly the employees, the line managers, and the top management. We put ourselves in their shoes and try to understand them. This is a soft skill that we should develop. And again, I'm sure we shall be discussing this concept later, so that we have a clear understanding of how we can deploy empathy to build trust and also obtain support and buy-in from various stakeholders in our strategic conversation. Another one is follow through, that we must always be committed to tracking the implemented action plans. If this does not happen, then we might lose track. We should always ensure that our strategic plans are monitored and ensuring that they are producing the results that are desired. Lastly is consistency, that in our strategic conversation, we maintain frequent, transparent communications so that we can obtain or sustain long-term credibility. These conversations should not be a one-off thing. They should be frequent as may be necessary. And then we put all the data on the table so that we promote transparency. Then building credibility, how do we ensure that we are believed and we can be trusted? That calls for mastery of HR analytics, strategy, and organizational behavior. Mastery of strategy and analytics. As HR managers, we need to conduct human resource analytics related to all the HR functions, just like we did in the morning. We must understand analytics, and we use this data to make decisions, particularly strategic decisions. Secondly is integrity, that we keep our promises as it were, ensure fairness in our dealings, and uphold confidentiality, that if there is any information obtained in confidence or in private, it should be treated as such. And again, remember the Data Protection Act talks about privacy. If private information or data is shared, then we lose that credibility. Reliability is consistency, that we should be able to deliver results over time. And that can only happen when we have consistent and deliberate conversations around strategy. Business acumen is understanding of finance, operations, and market aspects, which I have mentioned a little bit earlier. That in business-oriented language, if you look at clarity on bullet 2, we should articulate issues in a business-oriented language. And coming to this credibility, we are looking at business acumen and understanding of our business in terms of finances, operations, and markets. Finances has to do with the revenues, profits, and shareholder value. Operations have to do with the processes, systems, and procedures. Then market aspects have to do with 1, suppliers, 2, customers, and 3, competitors. An understanding of all this will help us to be credible, that we know what the business is about and what needs to be done. Another one is influence, that in building this credibility, we talked about influence and how can we can influence our stakeholders. We can use persuasive language, persuasion, so that we can influence or shape the decisions that are made by the various stakeholders. And lastly is partnerships. As we have always emphasized, human resource business partnership is very important because it enables us to collaborate with others across departments. As we close, let us look at the techniques of effective strategic conversations. Techniques of effective conversations. 1, active listening. When we talk, we are basically repeating what we know. But when we listen, we learn from others. So this conversation should be about learning, not about talking. So through listening, we learn. We learn from the other experts, like line managers or consultants. 2, questioning. We must ask those probing questions to uncover those hidden aspects so that we are able to align ourselves. In the morning, I talked about storytelling, that in data analytics, we use dashboards and storytelling. We need to tell our story about human resource management and the outcomes or outputs that we produce using data. Another way of effective conversation is data presentation, so that our conversation revolves or rotates around data. Strategic managers don't talk about descriptions. They don't talk about data, hard data, which can be presented using visuals or using matrices which have measurements. The other one is adaptability, where we are able to adapt to changes. As HR managers, we should be able to be agile, and agile means that we have a conversation on the changes that need to take place. Lastly is closure, that at the end of this conversation, we need to reach an agreement. What has been agreed and what are the next steps so that we can implement an action plan. How do we enhance credibility? Through communication. I mentioned this area that we need to be transparent in our communications, nothing to be hidden. Empower employees or stakeholders to make decisions, such as employees, line managers, or top managers. Confidence, that when we are making a case for strategic conversations, we must speak confidently, be assertive. The moment we shake in our presentations, then we are not sure of what we are saying, and therefore we cannot be trusted. Responsiveness is ability to respond to concerns promptly. If there are any queries or issues that have arisen in these conversations, we must be able to respond. And not just response, we must give adequate responses to address the issues. And again, professionalism, such as ethics, courtesy, and accountability, are key in HR profession, so that we ensure that these conversations are conducted in an ethical manner. Lastly, on enhancing credibility is impact. We always talk about value addition. What is the connection of HR initiatives and business strategy? So that connection is what we are talking about, so that we focus on outputs and outcomes and much less on any other non-issues. Lastly is the benefit of our strategic conversation. Why do we need to carry out these conversations? One, to ensure alignment. As I said earlier, and I repeat, business partners should be aligned. That HR management strategy is aligned to corporate strategy in terms of vision, mission, and objectives. Two is to build trust and confidence in our relationship with stakeholders. We also influence the stakeholders by allowing them to participate in our decision making, particularly related to our strategies. Engagement, that through these conversations, we bring people together so that they can bring their inputs or make suggestions on the way forward. Performance improvement, that through these collaborations, through these conversations, we are able to make improvements. And then lastly is about reputation, that the reputation of HR, reputation of the organization rests on the conversations that we have. If the conversations are strategic, if the conversations are value adding, then the reputation of our HR department is enhanced. And then on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I now invite us to ask the questions that we have related to what we have discussed so that we can close. Any question or comment that we may have, please go ahead and make your comment or ask your question. Anybody with a question, you can raise your hand or you can switch on your mic so that I can hear you. From my end, I can see Lorna. Lorna, if you are there, please make your comment or ask a question. Christine, if you are there, please ask your question so that we can close. Apparently, there seems to be no question, no comment to make, and therefore it is my singular opportunity and privilege to bring this afternoon session to a close. And I wish to thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for registering for this program. Tomorrow we are moving to module 5, which is also going to be very important for us, and that is strategic planning and action simulation. Thank you very much and have a good evening. Please be sure to join us. Yes, Christine, go on.
No, I was just thanking you for this session.
Thank you very much. May God bless you. Have a good evening.
You too.